for the Midwest Broadcast and Multimedia Technology Conference. Our next breakout session is titled Update on All Digital AM. It will be presented by Ted Nahil from Nautel. Nautel just upgraded their representation in this sales territory. Wait a minute, who wrote this? Ted's the regional sales manager for the Eastern U.S. for Nautel. He has an extensive background, both radio and satellite communications. His broadcasting engineering career spans back to 1977, during which time he served as chief engineer or director of engineering at facilities in Boston, Detroit, and Denver, working for Noble, Greater Media, Shamrock, and Salem. Ted moved to the vendor side of the business in 2000, working at Harris Interplex, where I met him, then ERI, SCMS, and Gates Air, before coming to Nautel in December of 2018, just about a year ago. He's been contributing editor for Radio World magazine and has participated in regional and national conferences and conventions as a panel member and primary presenter. We're pleased to have Ted back here, this time to provide an update on All Digital AM and appreciate Nautel's sponsorship of our break this morning. Please welcome Ted Nahil.
Thanks, Gary. Can you guys hear me all right? Because I don't do microphones. So we're going to go down that road? Perfect. Frank left. I thought I was off the hook now. Thanks for this opportunity to do an update on All Digital AM. At Nautel, we did at the NAB in 2019, this year, we did a session on Digital AM, All Digital AM, with Mike Cooney, Martin Stabbert, Mike Raid, and Dave Colsar. You'll see these names coming up here. But Dave Colsar is the Hubbard director, not director of engineering, transmitter engineer for WWFD in Washington, D.C. And they have been running All Digital AM since 2018. I have the actual date in here somewhere. I can't remember what date it was that he went on. I think July of 2018. It's on the next slide. But Dave was on the panel. Mike Raid is ex-Berry engineer, and then Martin and Mike are directors of engineering for Beasley and Town Square. So it was a pretty good panel. But Dave was into his testing at that point, and so I'm going to do a lot of stuff about Dave and WWFD because he's got a lot of good data on it. What we're going to talk about is, again, Dave first, then Brian Broadcasting. Anybody know who Brian Broadcasting is? Been a couple of good stories recently in Radio World and some other online publications about petitions to the commission to do All Digital AM. Currently, you need to do an STA. You have to apply for an STA, and the commission gives it for a year. There's a fellow named Ben Downs, who's a GM and VP at Brian Broadcasting in Texas, who's applied, petitioned the commission to do All Digital. And we'll get to that, but they actually have accepted his petition. They're looking for comments now, and I'll talk about all of this. So I got kind of a lot to get through, so I talk a little bit fast. If I'm too fast and you have a question, please put your hand up, okay? So here's a little bit of history on All Digital AM. NAB Labs, which is now called the pilot project, did all digital testing in 2012, the end of 2012 through 13 into 2014. They did multiple stations and multiple power levels, some DAs, some non-Ds, different markets, including, I have a list over here, WBCN in Charlotte, WNCT in Greenville, North Carolina, WBT in Charlotte. There were Greater Media stations, Beasley stations, Cumulus, some one-offs, a couple of owners, a couple of Class Ds, a kilowatt 250 at night. They did some pretty extensive testing. And then they followed that up with some in-lab testing in 2015 and early 2016, and then presented a paper at the 2016 NAB on All Digital AM. I use some of that information here as part of this presentation. But since that time, from 2016 until July of 2018, there really wasn't a lot going on. That's when WWFD went on the air. So they're at 820 in Frederick, Maryland, which is outside of Washington, D.C. They've been on since July of 2018. They filed for an extension in June and got it, so they're good for another year. Then, because of that, Bryan Broadcasting, Ben Downs, has filed with the commission, as I mentioned, to allow broadcasters to go voluntarily to go all digital on AM, if they so choose to do. So in response to that petition, the FCC, a couple of weeks ago, literally, issued NPRM 19-311, which is, and I'll get into that a little bit at the end, but they accepted his petition and they're now seeking comments. So this is moving forward, actually, for everybody who has been looking at this. So the first thing that comes up when you start talking about HD on AM at all is, why all digital? Well, there's a huge difference between what's called the MA1 mode and the MA3 mode in AM, and I've got some slides that I'll show you a little bit later. But the MA3 mode, the all-digital mode, has incredible advantages because it really cleans up the signal. Audio quality approaches that of analog FM. Coverage equals analog-only AM signal during the day. There's better immunity to environmental noise and interference, potentially significant reduction in adjacent channel interference. There's some support for data services now. So this is actually a very, very viable mode. The problem, of course, is that there's no analog left with that, right? So that's it's a risk that you would, as an AM operator, would have to take, that you're going to give up people listening on a conventional AM radio. So with WWFD, in the MA3 Core Plus Enhanced mode, and again, I'll show you that, but there are three different sidebands, or there's three groups of sidebands. There's the primary sidebands, which are the equivalent of a mono AM signal. Then there's a secondary set of carriers that adds the stereo, and then there's a tertiary carrier. And so that's called the enhanced mode. When you can get both the secondary and tertiary carrier, that's called enhanced. So that gives you the stereo. It also gives you the ability to do the data. So you can do title and artist. And I've got slides that will show you what WWFD looks like. But in the core-only mode, the reception tests show that there's reliable reception out to the 0.1 millivolt contour, which is pretty good for digital, really, really good. In the core and enhanced mode, even to the 0.5 millivolt contour, which is, again, pretty decent. There was concern about what would happen in a bad lightning storm. Dave has pretty much proven that it's not bad. It's certainly better than everybody expected. So you don't get all of that static and you don't get all of that noise. The next slide actually has some of this stuff here. At night, again, the core plus enhanced mode appears to work to about half of his nighttime coverage. So his nighttime interference-free contour is 10.8 millivolts. So his nighttime coverage is good out to about 5.4 millivolts. So again, at night, that's pretty respectable. I put a slide, I put a little paragraph up here about his air chain if anybody's interested. This is on your website, by the way. This is right. These presentations will be on the website. So some of these slides are going to be a little bit difficult to see, and you'll see why in a minute. But please feel free to grab this from the website if you're interested. So now this is the what's called the MA1 mode. So you can see the primary carriers. Okay, the primary digital carriers are all the way out on the outside of the band, right? So they extend out to 15 kilohertz, almost 15 kilohertz either side. You can see where the primary carrier is, all right? So there's a bunch of problems with this. You start getting into bandwidth issues with old AM arrays, right? Trying to pass 30 kilohertz in some AM antenna systems is pretty difficult. So right out of the gate, if you can't get this through your antenna system, your HD is not going to work, right? Because these are the primary carriers. That's your mono AM HD signal. Then the secondary and tertiary carriers were inside. So that's MA1. This is what MA3 looks like. So what's happened here is the primary carriers are now in right adjacent to the center, right? Only out 5 kilohertz. So this is a breeze to pass. If you can't get 10 kilohertz through your antenna system, you got some other problems, right? So now you can get the mono HD signal through the antenna system real easily. And then you can see that the secondary and tertiary carriers now only have to go out 10K, right, instead of 15. So now we're talking about having to clear 20 kilohertz to get all digital through. That's pretty easy to do, pretty easy. So this is the advantage of the MA3 mode. Any questions on this? It's pretty slick. We retain the unmodulated AM carrier. It's about 38% of the normal carrier. So there are some issues about how you calculate power and everything now, and I'm going to talk about those. And then as you saw, the MA1, the analog signals replaced with the higher power primary sidebands. The secondary upper sideband moves up, tertiary moves down, and the secondary carrier does adds the right channel. So that's what makes it stereo. And then all the data is in the tertiary carrier. And again, as you saw, the overall bandwidth is reduced. So here's a couple of coverage maps, and these are going to be really hard to see, I think. But you can see the legend over there is green, yellow, and blue. So green is good, complete, enhanced plus core plus enhanced reception. The yellow is core only reception, and then the blue is where he loses it. So again, it's hard to kind of see these on this map, but if you get the PDF that's on the website, you'll be able to see this easier. Pretty good coverage. Daytime coverage out to 40 miles. You can see the green out here goes out beyond 40 miles. So impressive coverage. Here's a nighttime coverage map. And again, good coverage out to about half of his nighttime interference contour. Okay? So this is what this stuff looks like. Well, this is the front of our transmitter. Dave started off with he had a BE first, I think, right? He had a BE AM6, and there were problems trying to get the MA3 mode through that. He always used a Nautel exciter, and he started with a BE. Then he tried a Gates, and that didn't work either. And the reasons for that were they had some sampling issues in the way they do the PDM. So there was a lot of self-interference being generated. So his current system now is an NX5, a Nautel AM transmitter, and the Nautel exciter. So this is what the front of it looks like. Here's screenshots from a radio, the Spark receiver that they've used to do all these signals. So again, we get title and artist stuff, we get album art, we get all of that stuff. This is pretty good, pretty cool for AM, right? This is the, Dave is actually the program director of this radio station as well. So he calls it the gamut. Basically, he says we play whatever we want, which is, I think, pretty true. But and so in addition to being the engineer, he's also the program director. So power calculations. One of the things that there's some concern about still is how do we measure the power now, right? With an all-digital signal, conventional power meters don't work well. Thermocouple meters work, believe it or not, and Dave was actually, he and Mike Raid have used the good old-fashioned thermocouple meters at some of the bases of their towers to measure the power. But the way that we've done it, and this is from Philip Schmidt, who's our chief technical officer now at Nautel, to size a transmitter correctly, if we're trying to get a 1 kilowatt carrier, we need a 3 kilowatt transmitter, basically. We divide by 0.38. So to get a kilowatt worth of carrier out of this, Now, remember, the carrier's reduced in the MA3 mode. So, again, to get something that you need a kilowatt for, we really need a 3 kilowatt transmitter. The commission has asked, and you'll see in a minute here, for anybody who's looking for more information on any of this stuff, Dave and Mike, Radio World Engineering Extra, hands, anybody? The current issue, go look at it. This is the cover story. Article written by Dave and by Mike, and there's a second part of that coming. And if you don't get it, if you don't subscribe to it, go online and get it. But there's good information in that article. There's good information on the NAB website. We have a webinar that on our website called we have a webinar that's available on the Nautel website. We also have this ebook called All Digital AM in the Real World that we did in conjunction with Radio World. So there's a lot more information out there now on All Digital AM. This brings me to Ben Downs, who is with Bryan Broadcasting in Texas. And Ben's the one who filed the petition with the commission in March of this year to allow AM operators to voluntarily go all digital. So it's wended its way through the commission. And again, Ben makes the same arguments for all digital that we all have made, trying to overcome the poor quality of AM, on bad receivers. A couple of us were talking about this the other day. I spent some engineering time in Detroit, and for Greater Media out there, and anybody who had a radio station in Detroit used to get calls all the time from the automakers because they all wanted to know what we were doing for processing and how do we make our radio sound really good and everything. Well, we all watched them take an AM radio bandwidth and go down to 3,700, right, from 15K. Anybody remember the old Dynakits and Heathkit radios? Am I that old? The answer to that is yes. These were full fidelity radios, 15 kilohertz audio. It was amazing. And, now, God, with the Delco radio, what do you get, 3,700? 100 to 3,700, right? Then it falls off. Anyway, so Ben made all these same arguments, reducing impulse noise, all of that stuff. And the commission has accepted his petition. Here are some of the other arguments that this notice that they just released on October 29th, he's concerned only, and you should go read it, by the way, he's concerned that they're trying to make perfect become the enemy of good. So the commission has raised a couple of issues that they're worried about, but they're really non-issues because, again, this is still an experiment at this point, and it can be fixed in software. MA3 mode is software, so we can fix a lot of the issues that the commission is worried about. One of the other things that Ben points out, and he's completely correct, this is not a panacea. It doesn't necessarily, the solution doesn't necessarily apply to all AM radio stations. If you have in fact, he has a station in the Houston market that's doing very well. He said, we're digital, we're MA1, but I would not ever go MA3 on that. But he's got another station down there that he would go all digital on. He says, if you're doing well with an AM station the way it is now, you don't fix what's not broken, right? So these are some of his comments. Again, you can take a look at this a little bit closer if you download the presentation off the website. But there's a group of folks that are pointing to DRM, which is what they do overseas, in a completely different band, right? Totally different radios and everything. And Ben's argument, and everybody else who's a proponent of what we're doing in the U.S. is it's taken 15 years to get 60 million HD radios out in the world, right? Who wants to start again from zero, right? So the answer, if this is going to work, it's going to work on the AM band as we know it. Okay? Just as a sideline, I've had, just in my territory alone, I've had interest on going all digital in Hartford, Philadelphia, and a couple of other stations in Washington. So the word's getting out there, and there's a lot of interest. There's people that are ready to spend the money. One of the things, if you take how am I doing on time, Gary? Oh, I have till 12? Oh, well, we're going to be done early. One of the issues that Dave and the folks at Hubbard had to overcome were antenna problems. Obviously, they had a very old array. There was a station that's diplexed in his array as well. There were some filters in there that were causing some issues and everything. So the conversion to all digital may cost some money, and that's something that people have to be prepared for. But I've got, like I said, I've got interest in stations in Philly and Hartford and more stations in DC already about going all digital. Anybody, any AM digital operators right now? Anybody? Wow. Well, Dan, have you shut all yours off? No, okay, I thought so. I just wasn't sure. Well, MA3 might be a solution. Well, I think you might maybe back this up, I think, but there were quality issues with it. I mean, part of the problem was the fact that the primary carriers were sitting out on the edge. So, there were reception issues with that. The other drawback, well, the big drawback to all digital AM is the fact that there's no analog carrier at all, right? There's no intelligence there. So if you hit the seek button, goes right by it, right? If you even know that the station, if you lock into 820, if you dial that up, we've got it down to about a frame and a half. So it takes about 4 seconds for the radio to lock, but that's 4 seconds of nothing. There's no analog signal there. So it's a big step to go to the all digital thing, because you gotta hope your people are gonna trust the fact that if they dial in your radio station, after 4 seconds, they're going to actually hear something, right? But I think they're probably the MA1 mode really didn't clean up a whole lot of the problems. I mean, with the primary carrier sitting out that far, the coverage area was reduced. Did you have? It's sufficient enough to get, I honestly don't know the actual bit rate, but it's sufficient enough to get 15 kilohertz stereo audio.
The best you could do with MA1, I think, was 32.
Yeah.
And it didn't sound all that great most of the time.
Right. Right. And again, it was working around the analog carrier, right? So, I mean, it was kind of like, we'll fit it in here where we can make it work. Whereas at least with the MA3 mode, there's no analog to worry about. So we've got the whole bandwidth really to it's up from 32. I don't know where I meant to ask Philip what we're running for a bit rate, and I forgot to ask him, but I know it's higher than 32. But anyway, so here's what's going on with the commission, actually, at this point. So on October 29th, they released 19-311, which is a notice of proposed rulemaking. God, I can never say that correctly. This is the first sentence in it. Tentatively conclude that a voluntary transition to all digital broadcasting has the potential to benefit AM stations and provide improved AM service and to the listening public. So boom, right out of the gate, they're on board. So now what they're doing is they're looking for all kinds of comments on all of this, okay? So the next group of slides is what they're looking for. So if anybody has any thoughts on any of this, you should go and make your comments known. but they're seeking comments on that conclusion. They're seeking proposals for technical standards for all digital, right? So the things that come to mind are the NRSC mask, number one, and how do we measure the power? I mean, those are the two real big considerations. So they're trying to come up with some, and looking for comments on and suggestions on all of that. They're trying to establish the procedure for a station to go all digital. Again, currently it requires an STA, so you have to file and you have to do all kinds of other things, as opposed to FM, where you just notify them within 10 days all the way up to -14, right? You can go on at -20 or -14, and all you do is just send them a note that says, oh, by the way, we're HD. So that's where they're trying to get at some point. And I've got some quotes out of the document, that they recognize that AM struggled with a decline in listenership, right? AM stations are susceptible to all of the noise issues that we know about, and that AM radio is being largely dominated by low-fidelity voice formats. I mean, this is stuff that the commission is writing down. So they're at least acknowledging that there's an issue, and they're seeking comments on how to, among other things, minimize co-channel interference. This is one of the other things with moving the carriers into the middle and reducing the bandwidth. We really have cut down on adjacent channel interference completely. It's almost negligible, right? Because now we're really only looking at occupying 20 kilohertz, as opposed to MA1 mode, where you need 30 kilohertz because you got to get the primary carriers in the MA1, right? So they're looking for, how do we minimize co-channel interference? We've got, one of the nice things is, with all digital, an analog station doesn't bother you, so that's kind of cool. But with two digital signals, it could be a problem. Nighttime operation comes up as well in this docket. They're wondering whether it's a problem with Skywave and everything to allow nighttime all digital AM. They're proposing to operate all digital simply, again, to just notify them with the Form 335 within 10 days. They're seeking comments on the effects of all digital operation in emergency. So this is another issue now that they're really concerned about. Again, I live in Florida, so starting in June, we all become weathermen, right? And we all look at Africa and watch all the stuff coming off the coast of Africa and everything blowing up in the Caribbean, and we muddle our way through hurricane season. There's no question that AM radio plays a huge role in emergencies. I think to this day, nobody will refute that. The iHeart guys, I mean, you guys fly things around to put a market back on the air, you know, to get, just so that they can get information out at, you know, when a station has been taken off the air by a hurricane. So this is a big concern of the commissions. What do we do with in emergencies? Because short of automobiles, there are not that many HD radios out there. Does anybody have a inside the house HD radio? Well, that's encouraging. That's encouraging. By the way, this works on the current radios. MA3 mode is not, there's no compatibility issue. Whatever AM HD radio you have now will pick up the MA3 mode. Anyway, so this is a big concern. And I honestly don't know what the answer to that is. But once you go to MA3, I don't think it's that easy to get back to analog. I mean, I think you could in an emergency. Yeah, probably a backup transmitter, something like that. I don't know. And then this one I thought was very interesting, the last one up there. They're also seeking comments on the amount of money that Xperi charges people. Well, I have it written down. I was going to say it's for AM it's different though. FM is 10, I think, and then a percentage of HD 2 and 3. That's the continuing thing. AM I think is 5. I think they're down to 5. But, you know, for a small market station, that's a lot of money, especially if they have to do antenna work and all of that stuff. Plus, you know, HD is just not inexpensive. I mean, you've got all the equipment that you need to buy as well. I don't know. But I thought that it was interesting that one of the things that they pointed out that they want comments on is how much money it's going to cost folks to do. They're looking for feedback from anybody in the industry on, you know, what's the state of readiness of AM as far as listeners go. And again, availability of HD receivers and the affordability of them. So I put a slide in here to let you know how you go and do this. I mean, you really should file comments if you're interested in HD on AM. Either way, I mean, if you think it's a good idea or if you don't think it's a good idea. But you can do it electronically at that website, or you can do it the old-fashioned way and just mail them. And this is the address to do that. And that's about it. See, I'm early. So a couple of acknowledgments. Dave Colsar at Hubbard, Mike Raid at Xperi, excuse me, Philip Schmidt, who's our CTO at Nautel, and Ben Downs, who was kind enough to take some time out of his busy schedule and actually answer a couple of emails that I wrote him all last week. So that was pretty good. Then I've got some reference stuff in here at the end for folks who want to go look and see where you can get more information on all of this stuff. Any other questions? Yes.
I got 4 short ones.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I
Go to
think-
WWFD and you look at the RFM meter at the base of the tower. What's it doing? Jiggling, steady as a rock, what?
Well, it's, you know, I haven't asked Dave that, but he's telling me that it's not reliable.
Okay. All right, well, that's just a curiosity. Again, WWFD, have listeners called them up going, oh my God, I love this.
Yes.
Keep it on.
Yep.
A lot?
Uh-huh. Yeah, they've gotten a lot of incredible feedback. Once people realized that what was going on, they've had a lot of listener feedback that's very, very positive. Very positive.
I think they're even showing up in the ratings.
Yeah.
Very little.
Whoa.
They're showing up in the ratings where they had more. I live close enough to DC. I'm far enough to where I can't listen to the station. I'm a friend of Dave's. I took a tour of the new TOP studios, and he said that they were showing up in the ratings, which was a positive. And by the way, I run some FM HD stations and had some issues and concerns for serving the public, you know, inside their home, which our listeners are accustomed to. And I was like, how's that going to work with AM? And he shut me down. He's like, Mike, they're listening on the stream now. So as far as he's concerned, when he said this 3-4 weeks ago, it's almost like this HD is for, you know, serving the car. And when you go home, you listen on your smart speaker or whatever. But he said they're showing up in the ratings. It's better than it's been in recent years.
Okay, very good. All right, that 38% analog, well, not analog, that carrier right in the middle, why is it there?
Why is it there?
What's it doing for us?
Well, you still need a carrier. Otherwise, the radio won't have any reference, right?
Single sideband?
Yeah, but the radios can't. We need to be able to deal with a radio the way it is now in the real world. So we need a reference.
Okay.
Yeah.
What happens if you put 50% of AM modulation on it?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
But let me tell you one thing. Dave is very, very open to answering questions, right? And I know. Yeah, I mean, he answers questions. Mike Raid answers questions at Xperi, and their email addresses are if you want, send me a note, and I will send them to you. I did clear with Dave before I started. I asked if he had a problem if I gave out his information. He said absolutely not. So certainly feel free to call him or send him an email, and he'll answer your questions. He really will. Yeah.
Capture this for the sake of the recording. They asked us to do that, so.
Yeah, Ted. The 38% carrier, and then you made the mention about needing a 3 kilowatt transmitter. So I must assume then that the conventional 1 kilowatt transmitter or 5 kilowatt transmitter at a site is not got the chutzpah or whatever to properly transmit the waveforms that
Well,
MA3 needs.
Dave's doing 4.3 kilowatts with a 5 kilowatt transmitter.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
But again, that's measured with all the power in across everything. So that I probably shouldn't have put the 38 thing up there, because that's literally just how you back into, it's like DAB, how you back into what you need for a carrier when you've got all of this digital information. And that's been the standard for DAB. I mean, if you're looking to get a 1 kilowatt carrier level, you divide it by 0.38. I don't know where that number came from, other than out of Philip Schmidt's mouth. And he does this stuff for a living. So I don't know the math involved in exactly why it works out to that number. But then that translates to, you need a 2.6 kilowatt transmitter
Yeah, it's
to
probably
get
peak and-
a kilowatt of carrier.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
But that's
okay,
carrier
that kinda
only.
makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll also mention from my time at Nautel that all of the amplifiers are very conservatively rated, so they tend to rate the transmitters based on what you need for analog. It's entirely possible that those transmitters that they're making today as 5 kilowatts, once they respec them for all digital, they might be an 8 or a 10 kilowatt transmitter or something capable of supporting that, because everything is defined now by AM modulation. And there's a lot of reserve in the power amplifiers. Anybody else?
One of the newest technologies for AM is actively reducing the carrier power with modulation.
Right.
How is this compatible with that, or isn't it compatible with that?
I don't know that it's compatible. You're talking about MDCL.
That's an analog.
And I don't
MDCL
know,
is an analog.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I know, but can it be used with this?
The initial feeling that we all have is that the answer is no, it can't.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Got another one.
Do you know if they've been able to do any real-world nighttime test with it? If I'm in the Florida Panhandle trying to listening to an 840, and we've got a digital WHAS broadcasting at 50 kilowatts, have they been able to simulate anything about nighttime service with stations, particularly the clear channel small C stations?
Yeah, in fact, they've taken nighttime measurements, and I do have a slide that shows where they were able to get out and measure where they had the core plus enhanced service, and then where it dropped back to just
Right.
core. But believe it or not, one of the guys who I've been talking with up in Hartford, Connecticut, can listen to this station at night in digital from DC to Hartford, Connecticut.
But then my question is, if he's got a co-channel that's also broadcasting on digital at nighttime, have they tested what?
Not yet, and
Okay.
that's one of the reasons why the commission is looking for comments specifically about nighttime operation. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, I was involved in some of the tests that the NAB did, and they did nighttime measurements. They did it in Charleston, West Virginia, with a 1 kilowatt class 4. They did nighttime measurements, both day and nighttime measurements on there. When they did the tests on WBT, they did that in the middle of the night, because the station wanted to stay on analog during the day, and so those were nighttime measurements too. What would be interesting is that, I was thinking earlier, years ago they did subjective measurements about what people will tolerate in terms of noise in the analog world. And they said it was something like 20 dB. It becomes objectionable in the analog world when you get about 20 dB of interference. So the question now would be, if you had a digital signal and introduced noise to it, whether it be from skywave or from electrical interference, at what point does that interference break down the digital so that it starts to drop out, compared to the old analog world where you introduced analog noise and basically you had to listen to it because it was just there. But obviously the noise onto the digital is not going to be objectionable in terms of listening, but the dropping out when it eventually does will be. So it'd be interesting to compare those two.
Yep.
And from that determine exactly how much more robust is the digital than the skywave interference. Yeah.
So on a conventional analog AM radio, if you tune to an MA3 station, what do you hear, if anything?
You don't hear anything.
You would not hear noise like modem noise, and it would not demodulate as like white noise.
I think that's what you wind up hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is a carrier there.
So you would hear white noise, but it wouldn't be determinable as from
Yeah.
the static in the background.
Correct.
It's a little bit louder, probably.
Yeah.
I noticed that you said that the acquisition time, they've got it down to about 4 seconds. So that would mean that, remember, diversity delay is irrelevant in an all-digital system. But the acquisition time being 4 minutes means that the latency of this is considerably less than FM then. Because FM, it takes you a good 8 seconds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dave mentioned that under really, really good circumstances, he's seen it as low as a frame and a half, which I think translates to about 4 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for ball game mode, which you can't do anymore because you won't be able to go analog presumably for a ball game, but maybe if the ball game play-by-play is delayed only by 4 seconds instead of 8 seconds, that might be a better situation for ball game situations.
Yeah. There's definitely challenges. I mean, there's trade-offs here, without a doubt.
Isn't it true that the only people that would actually see that are the people in the studio? The only people that would be keenly aware of the delays is someone that has access to both signals simultaneously.
Right.
Otherwise, if all you ever hear is the delayed signal, it's on time.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, well, at a ball game, you can see what's
Well,
happening
yeah, I mean,
versus
if you're
the
you're sitting
hearing
in the outfield, right, watching a ball game, that's what Gary's talking about.
Yeah.
Or if you're sitting in the bleachers watching a football game, that's where this falls apart, unfortunately. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Mark?
No, I was just going to ask
Go ahead.
product here.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no, don't do that.
Well, I'm assuming that if this goes through, I can call Nautel and say, send me an all-digital transmitter, and I don't have to say import or export or blah, blah, blah. I can just say, I want an all-digital transmitter.
I don't think that part number exists yet, but it will.
But that's where you're going, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I'll take it. I'm ready for it.
Well, don't forget, it's not like we haven't been doing this all along, right? I mean, all this is just an improvement over the MA1 system.
Yeah, but it's pieces parts right now.
But there's nothing magical here. It's a standard exporter. It's a standard, everything else is standard.
I want to take it out of the box,
Mm-hmm.
plug it in,
Yep.
and make it work.
Yep. Yep.
I don't have time to do all that stuff.
Right.
I just need to make it work.
Right. Yeah.
Still have phase of magnitude going into the analog ring at that point, though?
Yes.
Yeah, so you gotta make two connections, Mark, instead of one.
What if I buy one box out of the box, all that's done?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The exciter comes already. The exciter comes already connected with the two connections that you're worried about. So then all you have to do is, I'm kidding.
Trying to make it easy, you know?
Right. Yep. And it will be. I mean, it's not going to be any more difficult to set up than FM. I mean, you still need to set up your exporter, right, and get that all set up, and set up your audio.
We're about up to limit on time. Thank you, Ted. Recording of this session, along with the presentation, will be available on our conference website in the next few weeks. Our exhibitor showcase and luncheon is starting now across the hall in the Short North Ballroom. Plenty of food for everybody.